Hi there, my name is Will Hoffler and this is my Adopt a Neighborhood project. Behind me is the remaining carcass of a once proud dominant giant, Bethlehem steel. Once a pillar of our American industrial complex in the early 1900s, Bethlehem Steel Company attracted massive waves of immigrants to fulfill its supply and transportation demands. The city of Bethlehem experienced a rapid increase in housing projects, with its population increasing by as much as 300% in the early 1910s. When the steel industry slowed down by the mid-1980s, the industrial giant struggled to maintain its dominance. Thus, by 2003, Bethlehem Steel declared bankruptcy and abandoned its facilities. Although a litany of legal issues has arisen from the closure of Bethlehem Steel, such as environmental concerns and the abandonment of railroad easements, the issue I'd like to focus on today is the gentrification and the zoning disputes of Southside Bethlehem, or South Bethlehem. Southside was once a robust area filled with affordable housing. Many of the families that reside in this culturally significant neighborhood have deeply embedded roots, tracing their lineage several generations back. Sarah Satullo, reporting for the USC Center for Health Journalism, wrote that the ownership rates and neighborhood pride were high during the peak of Bethlehem Steel because Southside families predominantly worked for the steel plant. Today, however, roughly half the community own their homes, as many struggle to compete with the aggressive expansion of corporations and universities such as Lehigh. Lehigh's Path to Prominence expansion plan aims to increase its incoming class size each year so that by the end of 2027, its total student body is 6,000 students. For context, right now it's about 5,000. So where do all these new students live? The city has been grappling with Lehigh's ambitions and the vocal concerns of Southside residents. Article 1327 of the Bethlehem Zoning Ordinance dedicates a select area for student housing called the Student Housing and Home Overlay Zoning District. Lehigh and private entrepreneurs have selectively bought up dozens of the Southside homes because the previous residents could not afford to pay their mortgage or rent. And that's because the rising costs of living and the overall wealth that's kind of flooding the area is making the general costs for some of these low-income families much harder to afford. In fact, for a majority of these low-income residents, sometimes they're paying more than 30% of their income toward housing. The increased cost for these residents is due, like I said, to the rejuvenating effects of new arts and science programs, high-end restaurants, and preserved green spaces. Although the area is experiencing a second renaissance, Southside residents are struggling to keep up with the gentrification. Recent lawsuits, such as Emmerich v. Bethlehem Township and South Bethlehem Associations versus Zoning Hearing Board of Bethlehem Township, illustrate the rising tensions in Southside. Concerned residents argue that the encroachment of student housing, such as these behind me, facilitate nuisances like noise and odor, homogenizes the diverse history of the region, and pushes established families of their homes. If we pan to my right here, we'll see current low-income housing, and yet if we pan to my left, just over this hill are a bunch of fraternity houses, as well as other Lehigh student-funded housing. Efforts to mitigate the gentrifying effects of Lehigh's expansion have seen some recent success. A neighboring college, Muhlenberg, recently filed suit against the Zoning Hearing Board to expand this designated student housing overlay district. In their case, they argue that university housing promotes diversity and strengthens the economic region. The Common Pleas Court of Lehigh County held for the city. The appeals court affirmed. Despite the city's past rezoning practices, the city has stated that it will be more conservative in the future when considering rezoning, especially for residential areas being converted into commercial ones. Furthermore, Article 1327 of its zoning ordinance limits the amount of non-related families in a single unit to 3 or fewer, which directly targets student housing situations. Southside's issue of gentrification and rezoning resonate with the landmark case in Village of Euclid v. Ambler Realty Company. The city often cites to Euclid when rezoning residential areas into mixed-use or commercial zones. When contested by aggrieved citizens, the city's underlying argument is that the rezoning restrictions are constitutional because they substantially relate to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Often, this argument wins. Southside's rich industrial history is slowly fading away. Bethlehem's priorities seem to align more closely with increasing the overall economic value of the land rather than preserving the existing history. Although the area has witnessed a reawakening, the residing low-income families have struggled to keep up with the neighborhood's rising wealth. Zoning has drastically improved Southside's economy and popularity, but at what cost? These tensions will persist as the remaining local residents fight to maintain their homes while large corporations and universities leverage their immense resources against them. Having lived here for a short time before law school, I hope to see more wins for the Southside residents that preserve its important history. Thank you for listening. In researching for this project, I relied on the aforementioned cases as well as the city zoning ordinance for my legal sources. Additionally, I referred to articles in newspapers such as the Brown and White, Reading Eagle, and the USC Center for Health Journalism for background information. If we pan to the church behind us, this is one of the longest standing churches in Southside Bethlehem. In fact, this was created in the early 1900s to be kind of a sanctity for the incoming workers. This is one of very few remaining landmarks, however. I wanted to take this time to research this area in Southside because it's particularly important to me. I lived here prior to coming to law school, and I firsthand witnessed some of the gentrifying effects and expansion of Lehigh's efforts as well as large corporations. Thank you again for listening. I'm Will Hoffler, and this is my Adopt a Neighborhood project.